Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you all. So, we are coming back to Sprights, finally, for this season. It's been a minute since I've featured Sprights, and I think this is actually going to be the Season 20 deck profile here in the latter half of the month. So, one of the reasons that I kind of saved Spright for a little bit later is because I knew I wanted to kind of use it more as I climbed up in Master, and indeed, this is one of the decks that I use to climb basically in Master, like from Master 5 up to Master 1. Master 5 to 4 was done with the Adventure Kashtira deck, as well as Pure Kashtira, kind of while I was getting games for those deck profiles, and the rest of the Master Climb was done with a Spright Synchro deck that we're going to be seeing probably tomorrow, if not tomorrow, within the next couple of days. And then, of course, this Pure Spright variant here as well we also used. In fact, this was the one I used for like the kind of like Master 3 to Master 1 climb. For a lot of it, I used this Pure Spright deck here. So, we did, in fact, add 2 copies of Kashtira Fenrir, as you can see here. I am a huge fan of this card in this deck. It's really good because it's good at baiting out Disruption, like Ash Blossom and Infinite Impermanence. If you start your turn by special summoning the Fenrir and then activating its effect, a lot of the time your opponent isn't going to know if you're actually on like a Kashtira deck or not. As time goes on, I think less and less people are going to be negating Fenrirs because, one, people are going to learn that Fenrir is played in a lot of decks and not just Pure Kashtira. And 2, I think Pure Kashtira is going to start dropping off pretty hard until, of course, the second wave of support ends up coming out. So, in the meantime, this particular stage in the game, you can still catch a lot of people Ash Blossoming or Imperming this card. And of course, as a pure Spright deck, we love it when people are doing that because that means it's not happening to our Gigantic or our Spright Sprind there. So as far as like the build itself goes, not a whole lot has changed as far as like, you know, what tech cards we are or are not using. Aside from the addition of Kashtira Fenrir here, that's going to be like the main one. We're still on the Melffy package, still like it quite a bit. I also still like the Merry Melffys. This is kind of like the 15th extra deck spot, so to speak. Kind of this and also Sky Cavalry Centurea tend to be some of the cards that I end up cutting last. Or putting in last when it comes to building this extra deck. But I do like these 2 cards in particular. I really like the Merry Melffys because there's a lot of times where you'll have the option to synchro with Melffys, but Herald just isn't that great for whatever reason. Whether your opponent's already played like the main stuff you want to negate, whether the banish isn't that great against their deck, or sometimes it's just the fact that the bounce from the Merry Melffys ends up being higher impact on the current board state. So I like having the option, and there's a lot of times where Merry Melffys has definitely saved me there. And I really like Sky Cavalry Centurea because it's not just a good way to go into Zeus, although that is the primary reason why I like it. This is also really good for outing Avermax with an IP under it because the bounce effect does not target. So, and obviously it doesn't destroy, it bounces. So, good way of getting rid of it, and it won't even trigger the shuffle effect because that is only when Avermax gets sent to the graveyard there. So, yeah, I really like those 2 cards. I've been rocking them in the extra deck for a minute now, and I think that it's pretty much the way to go. Oh, there is one thing I wanted to talk about, and that is going to be the Pit-Knight. Pit-Knight Early is an option you can potentially include in the Spright extra deck, and it's one that I almost tested, but ultimately decided just not to include. And that's mainly because I don't really think there's a whole lot of situations in which Pit-Knight Early is better than something like IP Masquerena or Melffy of the Forest, right? Like, this card is a lot better in Tri-Brigade Spright because the link arrows actually line up a lot more often with your plays. But in Pure Spright, you kind of have to go out of your way to you know, make this in whatever zone that Elf points to, just to have it be live, and even then, it's just so situational, not just in terms of when you're able to make it, but when you would also want to make it and use it. So, it is a decent Link 2 option. I'm not saying it's a bad card by any means, but I do think that Merry Melffys and Sky Cavalry Centurea are better. I think some people might be wondering why I'm not trying out Pit-Knight Early. Again, I don't think it's that great. In Pure Spright, in exactly Pure Spright, in Tri-Brigade Spright, which I'm going to try to get to at some point this season, I do think it is, of course, a lot better because it's more integral and naturally slides into the combo line there. So, alright, I think that covers pretty much everything I wanted to specifically mention about the deck. As far as stuff like Triple Tactics Talent, if you don't have these, you don't need these. But they are very, very good in this meta and also in this deck in particular. Because often, it's not even that you just need level 2 monsters. If you have a level 2 monster that you can normal summon, you really often just need one monster to link it off with in order to make plays. And if that can be your opponent's monster that you're taking control of, that is just fine. So, Triple Tech, I really, really like Impure Spright. Personally, as far as my builds go, I kind of consider it core, just because I think it's that good, but you don't need it to play this deck by any means, so it's not a core card, I just really like it, I guess is what I'm getting at, but it is also really good, so. Okay, yeah, that's going to go ahead and do it for everything I wanted to say about the deck. Let's go ahead and break it down card by card, and then look at some gameplay. So, we're on to Swap Frog, Round 1 Ronintoadin, 3 Maxx, 2 Nimble Angler, 3 Nimble Beaver, 1 Melffy Catty, 2 Spright Blue, 2 Spright Jet, 2 Spright Red, 1 Spright Carrot, 1 Melffy Pinny, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 1 Bystial Magnamhut, 1 Bystial Druiswarm, 1 Bystial Baldrake, 2 Kashtira Fenrir, 2 Triple Tactics Talent, 2 Called by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, 1 Spright Starter, 1 Spright Gamma Burst, 1 Spright Smashers, and then 3 Infinite Impermanence. It's going to do it for our main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 1 Herald of the Arclight, 1 Merry Melffys, 1 Sky Cavalry Centurea. We have 1 Melffy of the Forest, 1 Onibimaru Soul Sweeper, 2 Gigantic Spright, 1 Downerd Magician, 1 Divine Arsenal, AA-ZEUS Sky Thunder, 1 IP Masquerena, 2 Spright Elf, 1 Spright Sprind, 1 Mekk-Knight Crusadia Maxx, and then 1 Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. It's going to do it for our list. Now let's look at these games. Alright, our first game of this video is going to be against Pure Kashtira. So they are on just the Shangri-Era Diablosis game plan here. Looks like we are in fact going to be taking the second turn. Opening hand it's alright. I mean, we have a Bystial Magnamhut, but of course, you know, against Kashtira, that's not going to do a whole lot because they play extremely few light and dark monsters. When I saw my opponent use Fenrir to add Fenrir, I thought at first that they were just going to be like some other deck in general, but then they special Riseheart, which I guess they already have the Fenrir not the Fenrir, the Riseheart there, so I guess in that regard they didn't really need to search it, but who knows. Alright, let's take a look and see what the Diablosis has banished. Opponent decided to pull a Spright Elf. I think it's a little odd. I think generally if you're going to play Diablosis or Unicorn against Spright, you often want to take either the Sprind or the IP. This is before I got my new alt-art IP, but I think the Sprind or the IP tends to be the better hit. In some situations, it can also be great to take Zeus if they're going second, the Spright deck is, but I would have definitely hit one of those over one of 2 copies of Spright Elf. I don't really care about losing one of the 2 there, so. Opponent is going to set 2 and then pass, so thankfully for me, they have a bit more of a limited hand as far as like what they're able to combo off with. They're not going to go full Shangri-Era zone locking here. I'm going to start by specialing and activating my own Fenrir before normaling the Nimble Angler and then specialing Spright Red. I then get to link the Angler and the Fenrir off for Spright Elf. Because I opened both the Nimble Angler, I can't really use Sprind to make plays here, which is a little bit awkward. But it's going to call by the Angler that I'm targeting with the Elf. That's fine. Not a huge deal. It's a little annoying. It means I have to use my red as a material in order to make plays here. But worse things can definitely happen. So going into the 3200 Gigantic Spright, going to be detaching material and ideally pulling out the Spright Blue. But my opponent has an Infinite Impermanence that's going to stop me in my tracks. So alas, no summoning here. And we also can't battle over the Diablosis either. So just going to have to set Imperm and then pass back over to the opponent here. They're going to try to activate the Diablosis, but I'm definitely going to go ahead and Imperm that. I don't want them to take my last Gigantic because I've already used 1 Gigantic in both Elves, so. Opponent's going to battle and run the Diablosis into my Gigantic. Might look a little bit weird, but this allows them to special summon the Fenrir that's in their hand and then go for the Riseheart. I was actually a little anxious here because I thought maybe they were going to drop a Zeus on me because they did battle with an Xyz monster. you don't have to put Zeus on the Xyz monster that battled. It's just that an Xyz monster has to have battled. But they're going to go for a number 11 Big Eye, taking my Gigantic. And then they'll activate the Gigantic effect, which I think was a pretty huge misplay. They got a Maxx from their deck so that way they contribute some of the Kashtira Ogre. But in doing so, they have prevented themselves from dropping a Zeus on top of that Big Eye, which is what I thought was going to happen. And I was like, kind of freaking out about it. I was like, I don't think I have a way to get around Zeus with my... Well, I know I don't have a way to get around Zeus with my current hand. But if they're just going to tribute someone for Ogre instead, like, I definitely have plays then. Like, yeah, they can search the preparations and then set it, but that's ultimately, like, going to be fine with me. Big Eye is not until end of turn that is going to allow them to keep the Big Eye there, or the Gigantic Spright they took with Big Eye. They are activating the effect of preparations now, so I'll go ahead and fire off the Maxx. They're getting the Unicorn, but at this rate, I'm not super concerned about the extra deck banish, because I'm just going to go ahead and try to find lethal here with the Spright Jet, or if not lethal, just enough to kind of like break my opponent's board, so to speak, so... Or no, sorry, we're not adding the, did I say adding Jet? I meant to say add Gamma Burst, but we're not doing that. We're getting Smashers here. We're then going to overlay into the Sky Cavalry Centurea some of the Bystial Magnamhut, and I'm pretty much just going to use the Centurea to clear this Ogre off of my opponent's board, bounce it back to their hand, and then I can run the Magnamhut into my opponent's Unicorn, smack them with the Fenrir. During my main phase 2, I get to then overlay the Downerd on top of the Centurea. If they're not going to make Zeus for whatever reason, then I will definitely go ahead and make my own Zeus here. There he is. Big old Sky Daddy himself. So, I'm going to be adding Druiswarm off this Magnamhut. It's not going to really make that much of a difference, because obviously my opponent's not going to have too much in the way of... light and dark monsters. I thought it was interesting here that my opponent decided to pull Ogre off with the preparations. That means they won't get some of the Ogre or any other Kashtira monster in their hand, which means they don't have much of a better play than this Ogre here. I don't really care about Ogre hitting stuff off the top of my deck. That's totally fine. They will get to battle over the Kashtira Fenrir, but in doing so, they give my Zeus an extra material, which means during the end phase, I can just go ahead and send their Ogre into preparations. Now they don't really have anything except maybe a hand trap, but I think that's pretty unlikely. They haven't really used much of anything up to this point. And then, yeah, as soon as I summon Druiswarm, I'm just going to go ahead and concede. But of course, we had the Spright Starter as well. We just had plays for days at that point. So, there you go. There was a nice grind game against Kashtira there. I do think that had they actually summoned that Zeus, that, again, I think the duel would have been over for me. I think it would have been a little bit too difficult for me to come back from that, but for whatever reason, they decided to go into Ogre instead, which definitely suits me. So that's going to go ahead and do it for that duel, but of course we have quite a few more to see, so let's go into the next one. Alright, this next game here is going to be against Hero. Love to see it. Hero is although I don't play it in Master Duel, because it's on my alt account, so I don't play it as often, but it is still a tried and true favorite of mine. Also, I'm gonna nerd out for a second about something other than Yu-Gi-Oh. I'm gonna nerd out about Final Fantasy X, because I think my opponent's name is a deep cut Final Fantasy X reference. There's a line that Waka has where Lulu asks Waka if she's trying to replace Chapu with Titus. Is Chapu 2 supposed to be like a Titus reference? If so, that's a really deep cut reference. It's probably not, and I'm probably just looking way too into it, but fun fact, I love Final Fantasy X. It's my favorite Final Fantasy. I don't think it's the best Final Fantasy game, but it is my favorite Final Fantasy game. But anyway, getting into a complete off-topic here at this point. In any case, we're going to go ahead and just do some pretty standard Spright plays here, right? Starting with Jet and Blue, get a normal Jet, special Blue, add a Jet. From there, going into Sprind, grabbing some Beavers, going into Gigantic. Some people have pointed out that it can be better to go into Gigantic first to play around Nibiru. And I don't disagree with that, but playing Sprind first makes your Elf a lot easier to set up later. So I just tend to do that anyway, just for the sake of convenience. Plus, besides, Nibiru is not real in this current metagame. Nibiru does not exist. Most people aren't playing it. I actually tried to play Nibiru for a little bit this season, like earlier on. I talked about this in an earlier video, I think in... what deck was it? I don't remember. It was in one of the decks I featured, like, in the first week of the month, but... I just think there's too many Spright and Tier Limit decks going around for Nibiru to be good. Too many Gigantics, and then of course, when you're playing up against Tier Limit, the Nibiru just does not do a whole lot for you there. So, yeah, this opening is pretty stupidly good. I get to set up the Spright Elf with the IP, with the Carrot, with the extra Ronin and Gigantic, and the Melffy setup, and 2 Imperms, and Ash Blossom. Oh my god. Like, my hero opponent just did not have a chance here. Like, I have too much disruption here, so... They're going to start off with the Stratos. I'm going to use Catty, and then Imperm on the Stratos. My opponent's got a red reboot. Holy moly. So, no Imperms here, no monster effect negation, but... I think with the rest of what we have here, we should still be able to disrupt our opponent very easily. Namely with this Melffy Catty, I'm going to add Pinny, and then I like to do this whenever I add Pinny off of Catty anyway, but especially in this case, your toggle here that's on auto, you want to flip it to on. That way, at the resolution of this chain link, you'll have priority passed to you, and then you can activate the effect of Pinny from hand as soon as possible. And I do want to do that to make sure that I'm synchroing for the Herald of the Arclight here, before my opponent gets priority pass to them, and they can discard off of Vision Hero Ferris, because Herald of the Arclight, in addition to being an Omnigate, has this fun effect that says any monster sent from the hand or made deck to the graveyard is banished instead. So yeah, that Malloy that my opponent just discarded, that got banished because of the Herald there, and it's going to be a lot harder for my opponent to have plays as a result. Also, fun fact, Increase while in the back row is treated as a continuous trap card, so Spright Carrot can negate it, and I will in fact be doing that here to negate the Vision Hero Increase. Those 2 actions alone, the banishing of the Malloy and the negating of the Increase, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for my opponent to have plays here. They will still be able to have like some amount of plays, but here they tried to force the battle phase, or they moved to battle phase to force the IP. But I'm going to move into Avermax here, and this is a setup that not only is my opponent going to concede to, but with good reason, because it's one I often like utilizing. That's going to be the Avermax plus the, excuse me, where is it? The, Herald of the Arclight, here it is, yeah. If you have these 2 cards out against a deck like Heroes, or I like having this set up against Tier Limits as well, it can be very good, right? Because the Avermax is going to protect the Herald of the Arclight from being attacked, and as long as the Herald of the Arclight is in play, any kind of graveyard setup your opponent's trying to do from the hand or deck is just going to be non-existent. Of course, the Herald of the Arclight also threatens as an Omni-Negate effect as well, so... Even though my opponent did lock down my Imperms, and as a result I was not able to negate any monster effects, still had the Herald and the Ash Blossom in hand as well to keep my opponent from making plays. Ash Blossom is, of course, able to be used even if it gets banished from the hand, because it just requires that it be discarded, unlike Maxx, which says send from hand to graveyard. So Ash Blossom, even though we had the Herald up, was still usable there. Very nice, very clean turn 1 setup that resulted in the hero player not getting to do a whole lot there. So that is it for that duel. Let us go into the next one here. Alright, so this game is going to be against what I affectionately like to call Kashtira Limit. This is Tier Limit that is not only playing Kashtira Fenrir, but also 3 Unicorn and a couple copies of Birth as well. So we're going to be taking the second turn. We did open an Imperm, so we do have that going for us, and Call By is not terrible either. Thankfully, my opponent's opening was not great. They're just going to end up setting 2 cards and then passing. And we top deck Swap Frog, which, holy moly, what a good top deck with the Ronin in hand there. Going to start by pitching the Ronin with the swap. Opponent is going to get the Havness effect off, though. And let's see if they end up milling 2 Unicorns and an Agido. Thankfully, we have the Call By for the Agido there. So that's going to stop our opponent's board and setup in general from getting, like, too scary. This is one thing that I will say. I know I was just saying earlier that, or in an earlier video, earlier today at the time I recorded this, but, Kashtira Unicorn, I've said a couple of times, is actually not a bad card to tech. And while I do stand by that, I think playing a full playset alongside Fenrir is not correct for most decks. I think that playing a single copy alongside Fenrir might be good for most decks that are already wanting to play the Fenrir anyway, but I think trying to force 3 Unicorn and a couple of copies of Birth just alongside Fenrir is ultimately going to just negatively affect the consistency of your deck. And here on even just a one, example scale, we are seeing that with the Havnus, right? To be fair, yes, my opponent did also hit Agito, which had I not had Callby would have led them to plays, but the other 2 hits being Unicorn, I mean, those could have been Fenrir, those could have been the Births. Like, it's one thing when your only Kashtira monsters are 2 Fenrir, right? And you're just, like, getting additional extenders off that way. But when you're playing, like, a whole dedicated Kashtira package, like, I don't know. The Fenrir adding Unicorn doesn't do anything here because we can't summon the Unicorn without already having Birth. And Unicorn adding Birth doesn't do anything unless we already have the Fenrir in hand. So in that regard, I just think it can be a little bit situational. So, anyway, gonna normal special the Carrot and then normal the Beaver. Then going into our Spright Sprind. We do have the Carrot live here in case the opponent has Imperm or Soliac. And yeah, they're just gonna go ahead and concede at that point. Because even if they'd had Soliac, right, I could have used the Carrot to sack off the Angler to negate, but not destroy the Soliac. That way it would be negated, but they wouldn't get a search. And you might be thinking, well, they'd still be able to send the Havnus and maybe make a play, but they only had 2 other cards in hand, and again, I think just because of the overall consistency of their deck being hampered, they very likely just didn't have another tier limit card. I think that's also why they just set 2 and passed ultimately as their turn 1. So I kind of wanted to keep this game, although it was very short, as a bit of a PSA. Like, yes, the Kashtira cards are very good, but that doesn't mean, just because Fenrir can go in anything, doesn't mean, like, Unicorn and Birth also need to go in everything. Although, one game is not enough of a sample size to determine the overall consistency of a deck, you can definitely see how my opponent was hampered just by having too many Kashtira cards in a non-Kashtira focused deck. So, we have one more game to check out. Let's go ahead and go straight into that. And our final game here is going to be against the most hated deck, I think, probably in Master Duel. It's Sales Ban Runick. So for those who are unfamiliar with this particular variant of Runick, it is utilizing the spell card Sales Ban alongside Members of Veil to basically set up an invincible Rongominad, which is very annoying, and of course, in addition to the Runick strategy, which a lot of people also find very annoying. But we just opened a God hand here. I mean, I'm just going to open with Angler and Swap Frog right off the bat, pitching the Angler for the swap that will not only, of course, have the Ronin in the graveyard, but that also counts for Angler's effect to pull 2 Nimble Beavers out of the deck. Lets me go straight into the Gigantic without even having to bother to make Spright Sprind first. Gigantic is going to pull out Blue because we already have the Swap Frog engine online. Blue gets to add Red because I think we already started with Jet. Yes, we already have a Jet here, so gonna go ahead and throw down the red in one of the zones Elf is pointing to. Elf is gonna bring back Swap Frog and set up another swap from the graveyard. We then get to overlay the Spright Jet with the Swap Frog for Melffy of the Forest. This will of course allow us to pull the Melffy Catty out of the deck there. After that, we're gonna go ahead and bring back Ronin with the Swap Frog, and then link it off with the Gigantic Spright in order to summon the IP Masquerena. Alright, now we get to bring back our Ronin one last time, set up the Spright Smashers, and then during the end phase set up the Melffy Catty as well, ending with an Ash Blossom in hand as well. We even had the triple attack on the off chance our opponent actually had some disruption, which they didn't. They're going to start off with Feather Duster on the back row Smashers, which is completely fine. I don't care about that at all. Alright, from here we've got the Runick, Runick Slumber is grabbing the Hugin here. Hugin pitching the Sales Ban. This is what allows them to declare Rongominad's name and then keep it on field forever. And then, yeah, from there they're just going to pretty much concede in the face of all my disruption. How particularly did I disrupt them there? Oh, I was going to use red to negate the Hugin, and then they conceded after activating the Freezing Curses? That actually looks kind of confusing. It's like, well, they negated your effects. Why did they concede after that? I think what happened here was they didn't have another Runick spell in hand. I'm pretty sure they realized, like, oh, I'm about to add Fountain, but I can't actually trigger it, and they just conceded. So, yeah, Not the most thrilling game, honestly, but definitely an ideal game against something like Salesman Runick. Like, it's definitely how you would want a game like this to go, especially like when you're in like Master rank, going up against this deck as you're about to climb up to Master 1 like I was. I saw the Salesman, I was just like, ooh, that could have ended a lot worse for me, which would have been not good this high up. So, cool stuff, cool stuff. All right, that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Thank you all for watching. I know a lot of people were waiting for this deck profile, so hopefully it was worth the wait there. But that's going to do it for our games, so let's move to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation. You do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is Hexlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.